what's your favorite movie and why?
As far as a movie, I mean, if we're going humor, like old school, old school's a great one. Wedding Crashers, Talladega Nights. So I'll kind of leave it with that. One of my Chicago fire buddies.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yeah. One of my Chicago fire buddies, Logan Paws, we would call each other Shake and Bake from Talladega Nights. So that was pretty fun.
Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with my old friend Jared Motz, who's Montz, M-O-N-T-Z, right?
M-O-N-T-Z. I would say Montz. Some people say Montz.
Montz? Okay.
Montzy, whatever.
Montzy? Okay. Well, this is pretty crazy because Jared is my only other friend out here who is a front row dad. Many of you, if you've listened to the podcast, you've heard about this group, Front Row Dads, that I'm in, which is fathers with businesses, not businessmen trying to be fathers. And yeah, so that's how we originally met. And then come to find out, Jared played pro soccer for many years, which I want to hear all about, is a serial entrepreneur, has a couple crazy businesses that he's currently in. I see your exciting Instagram posts of you cleaning floors and cleaning bathrooms, trying to teach people how to run a janitorial business. So that's interesting. There's just a lot going on, man. So first of all, give us the story of Jared. Born, raised, how the heck did you end up in Vegas like the rest of us degenerates?
Vegas, baby. Vegas.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I got to say, this is amazing. I feel much more big time than I actually am in the studio, having a drink, hanging out.
Yeah, Chris did a good job.
God, I got here and him and I got to geek out for a little bit. This was amazing because it's not what my soccer YouTube channel looked like 15 years ago.
The difference is your soccer YouTube channel made money and we have yet to make money. So it doesn't matter how fancy it looks if it doesn't make any cash. So anyway, right. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Subscribe.
Yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk for sure. It's like, as long as your content's good, who cares about the quality? It's like 40 million views and you can hear crickets in the background in some of these videos.
Right. So how do you end up in Vegas?
So 2012, I came out here on a whim into the summer, and I was working with a website developer at the time who was at Zappos. And back then our soccer camps business was called Online Soccer Academy. And we had custom code profiles. You could track your game progress. And anyway, that code was trashed because I broke one of the big rules of being a tech founder, which is paying someone to build your code versus having like a technical founder do it.
Ooh.
And that's all right. I got my MBA.
Perfect.
In trash software that costs $60K-ish plus.
Perfect.
And so I came out here to work with him for a month. Vegas in August. It's what you imagine Vegas in August to be.
It's a little warm.
Hot as could be. But Zappos was moving their headquarters to downtown. And Tony Hsieh put like $350 million into this downtown project fund. And $50 million of that was a VC fund. And I got here. And like where I grew up in New Orleans, outside a small town called Mandeville, which is where I was living after I stopped playing soccer. And it was great. I still love it. But people didn't think I had a job. They're like, what do you do? I don't get it. Like, how do you make money with these videos? Like, what do you mean you coach soccer camps? Like, they just didn't get it. But in a tech community, people thought I was really cool.
Right.
They're like, you have how many views? This is amazing. So I was like, so I just decided to stay. I mean, it was super cool. It was like there was a portable where the container park is downtown. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was a construction portable, and they were hosting meetups there with like some world-class VCs, phenomenal speakers, and having drinks in Tony Hsieh's apartment. Like it was a cool time.
Yeah, rest in peace, Tony.
Yeah, rest in peace. It was
poor guy just went off the deep end with who he surrounded himself with, and then the drugs, and just like it's a really like cautionary, tragic tale of somebody who was brilliant and just got the wrong people around him when he got really wealthy, right?
I can't speak to all of that. What I can speak to is what I find is some visionary founders, when the business hits a scale where it doesn't need any more vision, it needs just like repeatable process, HR, good training of people, all that stuff. I think he started kind of moving chess pieces around when he didn't really need to.
Yeah.
And and some of the original people that were like on his teams there and like they were starting to be like, what are we doing? Like he was implementing this like flat hierarchy where like no one had a leader to report to and just confusing people, which he's a visionary. Like that's what they do. This is just hearsay.
Right.
So I don't know. I can't speak to anything else, but yeah, it's a bummer that there was someone else during that time period that committed suicide that I was friends with during that sort of those first year or two of Downtown Project. And he was another one where you're just like, man, the guy was a genius. But got too far in over his head, and it was easier for him to go out. And, I don't know why Tony pushed it as hard as he did. Maybe he just wasn't happy, which is ironic for the freaking book title that's Delivering Happiness. But that's also part of this, like, for me personally, I feel really strongly about, like, toxic positivity. It's kind of bullshit. Like, at some point, just own it if you're having a bad day. And that world was a lot of, like, fake happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. Was that the name of the book, Delivering Happiness, or is that the Amazon one?
I don't know, maybe.
Chris, maybe you can look that up, the Tony Shea
I
book.
thought it was Delivering Happiness, which was great, but there was also a lot of stories of, like, you don't have a bad day around here.
Right.
Like, everyone's having shots and partying, and, like, at some point, it's okay to have a bad day.
Yeah, that'll catch up with you. And, a good friend of mine, a mentor, shout out to Steven, I remember us having a conversation about, I don't know, just getting older and being a man, and he's been, like, a really, really, really important mentor in my life. And he said something, he's like, yeah, for a lot of men, the act of becoming is way more interesting than the act of being. And when he said that, I was like, oh yeah, that answers so many questions about why men cheat, or why men are serial entrepreneurs, or why men take up new hobbies and get obsessive for a short amount of time. Because the act of becoming is like, okay, cool. You got to your black belt. Now what, right? It's like, you're there, you arrived, or you build this big multi-billion-dollar business where you have hundreds of millions of dollars of an exit, and you're like, oh, cool. Yeah. Now I'm there. Now what? And if you don't find something to facilitate that, like, I want to become a better father, I want to become a better husband, to the point where, like, I don't know if you've seen this. I think I've got this since the last time we hung out. Yeah. I got a tattoo on my arm that says becoming, because I'm like, I just want to be reminded at this age, at 45, I know a lot of men, some in my family, who kind of started to give up about this age because they weren't thinking about becoming the next thing. And so I wonder if that's like this founder's dilemma, where they get to a point, they exit, the thing is done. And, like, if they don't find the next vision, I imagine that has to be in some ways absolutely soul crushing, almost like if you're a professional athlete and then you have to completely change your identity. So let's go to,
there's also the, part of that is the rush, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of people's drug of choice is, illegal things. Other people's drug of choice is hard work, adrenaline. A lot of players struggle when the game's over because you're not playing in front of 50,000 people anymore, or 20,000 people. I didn't get to do it, not even close to as much as I wanted to. Dang, you get to celebrate in front of, like, 20,000 people. Woo! Like, you don't feel your body in that moment. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Tim Howard talks about this a lot. He's one of the legendary American players and commentator now. But, I'd kind of say, like the founder's dilemma, to me, there's that, for me, I had that small chip on my shoulder, which served me well for a really long time until it doesn't anymore. Like, what's driving me? And, I'm sort of always trying to keep that ego in check of, like, even if it's not cockiness of an ego, it's just, there's one of my favorite books is Ego is the Enemy, and it talks about that, and, like, what got you here won't get you there,
right?
And so I know I am mindful of that. Like, at some point, like, I am enough. Like, I'm good. Like, I killed it today and only worked a couple hours.
Right.
I didn't need to do any more.
So when I think of professional soccer player in America, I think of, like, hardworking Hispanic family growing up in LA or Chicago or some major metropolitan area where there's great, like, opportunity to compete with the best of athletics. So how does somebody growing up in rural Louisiana somehow make the journey to professional soccer player? Because, no offense to you, but you're on the smaller stature.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's beneficial or not to soccer, because the only thing I know about soccer is it can end in a tie, which is why I hate it. But how does one go from rural Louisiana to the MLS, playing for the Chicago Fire for 4 years, and, like, actually making a living playing soccer, which most Americans cannot say that they have done at any point in their life?
Yeah, well, we got to clarify what making a living means. Back in 2005, 2006.
Okay, so 2005, you were not getting, MLS players were not getting.
No, not MLS players.
Okay.
MLS rookie players from small town Louisiana who went undrafted. They weren't making a living.
Okay.
But for me, I mean, there was guys on the team when I was at Chicago, $400K a year.
Yeah, it's good money.
Great money.
Yeah, it's not NBA or NFL superstar money, but that's a good living.
That's good money.
Yeah,
and they just introduced that designated player rule around that time. But, for me, it wasn't about the money. I always told myself this was my dream. the fact that I'm a pro soccer player is worth way more long-term than any little contract they're going to give me. And, you know, I had a soccer camps business in my off seasons, like to supplement some income. You know, the only thing I bought myself was a lazy boy chair. You know, like I didn't have much. I didn't need much back then, which is fine. Yeah. And as far as being small town Louisiana, outside New Orleans, I graduated high school in 01. You know, there was one soccer game on a week back then on TV. And I knew I wanted to play pro around age 12. I had no idea where that was going to be, what was going on, like where I would do that.
Wait, were you like a 12-year-old who's like, I want to be a fireman when I grew up? Or were you like, I'm going to play pro soccer if it kills me?
It was that second one.
It was that.
Yeah, it was. And, you know, my therapist and I could go deeper into that. Like maybe like had I picked a different sport, it would have been similar outcome because that was my drive. Like that got me through a lot of hard times, training, pushing it. I'd still go out and party with friends, but like I would train first. Then I'd go have a beer or two, responsibly, for any kids listening. But I had this South African coach at 11 or 12, and he was just this lunatic of a crazy, and he just instilled this passion, you know, right? Like, come on. And like, that's a dang good rush, you know, like, which now I do these like war cries that we've learned in Front Row Dads, like trauma release stuff. Like if you saw me, you'd probably call the cops, but you know, I do it in like a quiet, safe space, and it's amazing. But soccer was so cool. And one of the things I loved was it was a thinking person's game, you know?
Explain more to somebody like myself who doesn't know anything about soccer.
So I got the fortunate opportunity to I had a phenomenal speed and strength coach. His name's Kurt Hester. So in high school and college and pro, like I used him. He would take NFL draftees from 6th, 7th, 5th round picks and get them up to 2nd and 3rd.
Wow.
Because of their combine stats. And so I was coming out of high school benching just under 250.
And you were weighing what, 140?
150 pounds.
Yeah.
I mean, that was like, I didn't see anyone benching close to me.
Yeah, so time and a half your body weight as a soccer player.
And I wasn't like 40-yard dash fast. I was really quick over 5 yards because I was smart. So I would send a defender 1 step left. I'd be moving 1 step right. Now I have 2 steps of space, and I'm quick over 5 yards. Like, so I looked faster than I probably was. But the thinking person's game, you know, if they can't touch me, they can't knock me over. And I could also get stuck in and hit really effing hard, which I did enjoy doing. But the game is, so I call it check your shoulder. And I didn't learn this stuff until I was a pro. And I learned it by watching the veterans. Like no one taught me this. And there's a guy named Jesse Marsh who's since gone on to coach in the English Premier League. He's from Wisconsin. Like he wasn't that fast, wasn't that strong, but I would see his hair just like turning. And I was already a pretty smart player, but this helped me like create a process to be smarter. So the game's going real fast, but when I was at my best, it felt like it was in slow motion because I was thinking so much faster than everyone else. So essentially, like before you pass me the ball, a lot of people say, keep your eye on the ball, keep your eye on the ball. Well, in soccer, you need to take your eye off the ball. So you pass it to me, and I'm doing a 180 looking behind me. And if I'm really good, I'm looking over both shoulders. So I get a full 360 view. So when that ball's coming, if I see a defender, I touch away and pass back. He can't touch me. If I see space, I turn and go forward. That's kind of the basics of it.
Is this kind of like the Wayne Gretzky thing where you used to say, like, you know, high school players skate to where the puck was, really good players skate to where the puck is, but world-class superstars, they skate to where the puck is going to be? Is it kind of like that same thing where you kind of know, you know where the next 20 yards of play is going to be in the game? Kind
of, and I also might know like 3 to 5 options. And sometimes I'm just going to play the ball without the other person even knowing it. But I know if I play it, they're just going to run to it like a puppy dog. And I would build that into my training and stuff I coach now. But I was always the player. I call them big smalls now. Small improvements daily equal big improvements over time. So like freshman year, I wasn't a starter on the varsity, but I got playing time and I earned the respect of the veterans. You know, I also was taking my shirt off with no armpit hair. Freshman year, like with all these like 18-year-old men around. But sophomore year, I'm starting in all district. And that played out similar into college too. Wasn't a starter on the freshman, like as a freshman. We had all these old English guys. They're like late 20s, some of them. It was awesome. Sophomore year starter.
In college?
In college, yeah.
Why were you playing with 20-year-olds or older 20-year-olds?
I went to a Division II team in Florida, and it was run by an English coach. We likely broke a rule or two.
Right.
But we had these like 25-ish-year-old players from England that he would,
because they still had quote unquote eligibility.
yeah,
Wink, wink.
I don't know. I don't know how they did it, but like, you know, these guys are like working in factories, not doing much, missing soccer. And he's like, hey, you want to come play in the Boca Raton Sunshine? Like, we would train shirtless.
Yeah. It's not a bad gig.
It was amazing. And that, you know, I'm not small in soccer terms. I'm not big in soccer terms. American coaches would always overlook me. Foreign coaches that knew the game pretty well and could see the small things always had me as one of their top picks.
Interesting. Mm-hmm. Is it because American coaches, like, they equate the natural kind of build, athleticism, you know, that big football player mentality? Like, I mean, like American football, not soccer. Is that what they're picturing? And like the European coaches just know better? Because that's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, the rhetoric when I was coming up was, we'll take a big kid and turn him into a player. And they were doing this at like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Like, most of the guys out there hadn't even gone through puberty yet.
Right.
Which to me is not good logic. And then, so you actually see this. The game is definitely changing now. Like, if you look at the U.S. national team, not everyone's a beast, like a monster out there. One of our top players, Christian Pulisic's he's like 5'6", $130, and he went to Europe at 18. So there is a culture shift happening, and you know, to me, that's why it's an awesome game, because you don't have to be the biggest out there.
Right.
Do those things help? Sure, they help, but you know, kind of got to focus on what you control. And it's such a thinking person's game, because you're not out there running plays. Like, no one's running down, even in basketball, you're holding up fingers for a certain play you're going to run. Soccer,
yeah, certain screens, et cetera, et
soccer,
cetera.
you got patterns, whatever things you might do, but ultimately you're out there making decisions.
So in soccer, there's no like defined play where you're coming down the field, or the pitch, as you people call it, and then
I call it a field.
Okay, field. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, this guy's going to screen this side, this guy's going to break this way. It's more just like you're in the moment of the game, trying to respond to what's happening.
You're in the moment of the game. There's plays within the game that you might they call them set pieces. Those are a little more like, all right, someone's running to this post, someone's running to that post. But typically, while the game's going on, there's themes, there's strategies, there's tactics, but there's not like, hey, we're running play 3 here.
Got it.
So, yeah.
So you mentioned having the same strength and conditioning coach, high school, college, you know, when you were making your way into the pros. Did you come from a family that had like money for all this stuff, or did you just seek out these people and volunteer your way into getting better training? Like, how does that work? Because, like, you know, when I was 11th grade wrestling, yeah, it would have been real nice to be stronger. But other than getting yelled at by the coach and being told, hey, nobody in this room works on beach muscles, do squats and deadlifts, that's all you're allowed to do. Like, that was the extent of my weight training, right? And so when I think about at 15, 16 years old, I wouldn't even been able to conceptualize that there's this whole world of like professional trainers to try to get me to be able to wrestle in college. And that wasn't my path anyway, because I wasn't that good and I started too late. But like, how does this even enter your mind at 14, 15, where you're like, I need a strength and conditioning coach. Like, I got to get so much better so I can be a pro. Like that wouldn't have even like rang as a possibility in my 15-year-old brain.
Yeah. There's a quote. It's so interesting now, taking a minute to pause on it and thinking about quotes that inspire me now and things I do now, and like seeing that play out when I was a kid. So there's a quote I really like about a smart person learns from their own experience, a genius learns from the experience of others. So I was sort of like seeking out mentors and coaches back then without like really realizing it. And something I used to say was like, I got to create my own luck. Like, no one's going to come find me in small town Louisiana for soccer. Like baseball, football, basketball, it's a little different, but like not soccer.
Yeah.
You know, I was getting called inappropriate names for being a soccer player back then.
Right.
And so I'm fortunate that I did come from like a middle-class family. My parents were able to support some of my goals without being excessive. I used to drive 2.5 hours to play on this team in high school, just each way, just to go, because they were the team going to the right tournaments. Like, again, I got to get myself lucky. Like, luck isn't going to find me. And one of the things I did with the speed and strength coach is I actually did volunteer as an intern or something. And then I paid some of it, but some of it was just like volunteering or like a high school internship. And then ultimately I trained a lot on my own, which is our soccer camps business. It started as Online Soccer Academy and still is. We have hundreds of videos on YouTube. They've been viewed almost 40 million times. Essentially, that's backyard training and coaching that I wish I had as a kid. But
Wait, your YouTube channel has 40 million views?
yeah, just under.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And this is all just like soccer drills that some aspiring kid can do on their own, more or less.
Like if you're a driven player, and I mean, we have thousands of comments. We've removed the comments quite a few years ago. We have thousands of comments of like the impact we've had, not just on kids, but like even adults that like play.
Why did you have to remove the comments? People were just getting toxic?
No, actually 95% of our comments are super positive, but I was sort of like community leading that.
Yeah.
You know, early days, very Gary Vaynerchuk, writing everyone back, every comment. You know, if I saw someone curse and not be rude, I'd make if it was okay enough, appropriate, I would use it as a teaching lesson. And they'd usually write back something like, I'm really sorry I said that. And I would leave that there for others to see. And you'd see these comments start to self-regulate. It just got to the point where, look, I'm people first, business second, but it got to the point where I couldn't keep up. I didn't have an assistant. I wasn't set up. I didn't know what the heck an online soccer academy was in 2008, 9, 10 when I was getting going, you know? It's not like now there's a really clear pathway.
Yeah, you were like 15 years ahead of the curve. Like if you look at Alex Hermosi's school, or you look at any of these online training portals, it's like now there's whole things set up to where if you want to be the coach of how to install, you know, insulation on the side of a podcast studio, you can create a course.
And the tricky thing about that, like if everything I've learned, I apply that into my businesses and like other things, it's pretty powerful. But back then, like, you know, my customer is a soccer player who doesn't have a credit card.
Right.
And parents barely used a credit card on the internet back then. So there was that. So like you would win it with the kid and then they'd go ask their mom for money to buy something. And what's the parent usually going to say?
Yeah, absolutely not. What are you, you're getting scammed or whatever.
Yeah. They don't know it. Right. So it was just very clearly back then I was like, you know what, these are all going to be free and I'll figure it out, which essentially the business model is we have in-person events, soccer camps, people watch the videos, they come to camp. Well, I'm getting a little off track where
Oh, it's fine.
So
the
videos are essentially me coaching myself, right? And they're like how to kick a ball high and far, how to chip a ball, how to ping a ball, all these little things. Like most of my soccer coaching growing up was like kick it harder. What do you mean by that? Just kick it harder. I'm like, what the hell does that mean? You know, you go watch one of our videos, like here's me kicking it harder. Now let's break down the 6 key points on to do that, and let's do deep practice on each one. And now it's evolved even more. We do soccer yoga. You're just going to hold this pose and get used to how your body's going to feel. Like in golf, we practice our swing, but in soccer, we just play games all the time. That didn't add up to me. You can't hammer a nail. You can't build a house.
Right.
And yeah, so our videos range from stuff like that all the way to how to be more aggressive, how to handle a mean coach. And everything's sort of wrapped in this kind of like, not cheesy positivity, because, you know, you got to try. But we say, like, if you believe in it and back that up with hard work, anything in life is possible. But, like, you do got to work hard.
So going back to working hard, high school, you're driving 2.5 hours to get to games in the middle of nowhere to just practice with a team that's going to the right games. How did you know that piece? Like, how did you know I got to align myself with, you know, in CIF in California, it would have been like, you know, there's like four divisions based on size of school. And not surprisingly, the bigger schools have the bigger athletes. So if you're like CIF Division 1, you want to go to one of those schools if you're thinking about getting recruited for football. So like, again, how did you know? Because it doesn't sound like your parents were big soccer heads or anything.
No, they weren't.
You just figured this all out?
I just kind of figured it out. Like I just kind of figured it out where it was, I like to think a lot of the world is, you know, it's not black or white. It can be gray, but there's also a lot that's just very black and white. And for me, it was really obvious. My local soccer team in Louisiana was not going to college showcase tournaments. And I was basically the only one on the team that wanted to go. My friends wanted to like goof off and drink and then play soccer. I'm like, can we play soccer and then go have a drink and like hang out a bit? And like now I say it's like in business or marketing or whatever, like don't fight the current. Go with the current or move on. And so for me, I found a team that was, most of the team wanted to play in college. They were going to the right showcase tournaments. And thankfully I had supportive parents where they're like, yeah, we'll drive you up some. And then, you know, I was driving myself up and it ended up being beautiful because that time on the open road, you know, your brain's flowing, you're thinking. I mean, I was forced to make new friends. It was pretty special. But yeah, it was that black and white to me, like, either get on this team or you're not. Like, there's no men's soccer in the SEC either.
Got it.
So that also makes it harder, right? Like I had to get out and go, and yeah, it was.
And then how does college, you know, this team in Florida come calling, or did you go calling them?
No, we went to a handful of recruiting tournaments, and this one tournament we made it to the quarterfinals. The sidelines were lined with college scouts. I played pretty good. I got like a handful of letters, and I went on 2 recruiting trips and picked this team in Florida.
Yeah, Florida for the win. Sunshine.
It was mainly that they were the team I thought would give me the best chance to go pro.
Why?
All of the team members were these old English guys.
Oh, okay.
And they were consistently ranked really high, even though they were Division II. If I had a do-over, I would have played there for 2 years and transferred to a big D1 program. But my college coach kind of screwed me over, and so I figured it out another way.
Nice. And so you do 4 years? Did you graduate, or did you leave early for MLS?
I left early and graduated.
Okay.
Otherwise, my grandma, rest in peace, would have killed me.
Nice.
The summers going into my junior and senior year, I knew someone who knew someone. So I played on like a semi-pro team in the summer, and one of the older players on the team, his dad used to own a pro team in New Orleans when it was like minor league-ish. It was called the Gamblers. Well, that pro team had a couple people that were now MLS coaches. So he was willing to make a phone call or two for me, and he got me in for a couple days of like pro teams will have college players come out.
Yeah.
For a couple days in the summer and just kind of see what happens. And
it's like an informal tryout, and they're
it's kind
using you as the beat up squad or something.
That's right. Sink or swim. And it was amazing. That's what I wanted. Like, I just, if I'm good enough, I'm good enough. And
because for you, this is like the Super Bowl, right? Like for these kids, it's like or for these pros, it's like a summer practice where they're staying in shape. But for you, this is the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Because this is your chance to shine for a pro team.
Right? Like I'm like 19 showing up at it was Dallas Burn at the time. Jason Kreis, who is from my hometown. He was like an MLS legend. He's a phenomenal coach. He's on that team. Like, it was a huge deal. And the coach, I remember cutting grass like one day in the summer. I got my Walkman on, like listening to Creedence Clearwater. Like, so I would do like cutting grass and little jobs like that. I didn't make it a business. I just made it where I could make enough money to cover the basic bills I had to then, put more time into training. Coach calls me up and he's like, yeah, Mr. Pate says you're worth taking a look at. Do you want to come train with us? I said, yeah, that'd be great. He goes, all right, cool. If you suck on the first day, we'll ask you to leave. And if you do good, you can stay for the week. I said, sounds great, coach. Let's go, baby.
Oh, man, that reminds me of my buddy, Jimmy Ferris. He was in the NFL and like same type of thing. Like at 7 years old, he had a letter in his own helmet saying that he was going to make the NFL. Undersized white guy, was kind of that first prototypical small 6 foot white slot wide receiver that like Bill Belichick kind of went to with Wes Welker and a couple of the other guys. Anyway, he won a Super Bowl with the Patriots, but I think we interviewed him. I think in his first game with maybe the 49ers, he was on special teams and he muffed a punt and he was gone the next day. They were like, hey, if you're special teams and you're low man on the totem pole, there is no margin of error. You suck on day one, you're gone. We're going to trade you now. It's like, what? Yeah. So you dropped one punt and you're gone? It's like, yeah, it's the NFL. There is no margin for error if you're not a superstar. So you went out there. Obviously, you didn't suck day one because the story has a happy ending.
Yeah, I didn't suck day one. And it was pretty neat because Clint Dempsey was also a summer recruit. He's like one of our top he was one of our top U.S. national team players, and I had no idea who he was. And he's got this long hair, and he's like kind of cocky and moving real slow. Well, the coach is like, we're doing a scrimmage with some other. It's like a really good youth team, and it was like the backup players and some guest people. And the coach is like, "Can you play left back?" I said, "Yeah, coach, whatever you want." Like I played center mid, and I'm right footed, so I end up, and I was playing right back in college, like an attacking right back. Long story for soccer people, it's like English people get the ball wide and cross it in. So I could do more play banking at right back than I could at center mid on this English team. So I was like, yeah, I can play left back. And I ended up just having a great game. Like I balled out, did my thing, got an assist. I'm out there, man on, turn. One of the coaches is like, who the hell's saying all these words? I'm like, that's me, coach. He's like, great job. Because a lot of American players can be real quiet out there. But these English guys, man on, turn. They're living it. It was awesome. And I loved that. I just loved it. So balled out, got to stay for the week. And being from a small town and always being, even you're saying it right now, which is, that's all good. But it's like, you're small. Like you can't do this. You can't really go pro. Like that's the messaging you get. Right. And so I had to sort of start, I just sort of looked for these data points that were telling me, because I didn't know what a D1 player, I just assumed all D1 players were amazing. I'm out here kicking some ass against some of these D1 college players that are at training this week. And I'm like kind of blown away, like, what the hell? And there was a scout there from Europe, like with some player they brought over. And I remember after one of the practices, like he came up to me and was like, wow, that was an amazing ball you played. Like, how old are you? I'm like, I'm 19. I also looked like I was probably 12, easy, you know? And I just remember thinking, damn, what a compliment. That guy has no idea I'm not on the team. He didn't know what's going on. He picked me out to come talk to after practice. And that gave me a good confidence boost. And then,
I was going to say, was that validation that, like, I deserve to be here?
Yeah, it was validation. It wasn't like a cocky thing, but it was like, you're on the right path. Keep it going. You know, they're not going to come scout you at D2, even though you're national champs junior year, even though, you know, you lose 5 games in a whole 4-year period. They're not going to come find you. My coach was also a total prick and like screwed me over and tried to F with my head so I wouldn't ask for more scholarship money.
Jesus.
Because it all went to the foreigners, which many of them deserved. There's definitely a few where you're like, what the hell? Like, I'm way better than that guy, and he's a jerk. You know, and I don't appreciate like head games and stuff. Like, that's manipulative and narcissistic. And so he wasn't going to bat for me. So, you know, I found my own luck. Got to train with Dallas 2 summers and Chicago 1 for a couple days, and that's how I got in.
And was that enough? Like, dude, and excuse my ignorance again, I probably should have looked this up before you came over. Do they have like a traditional draft like we think of in the NBA?
They do have a draft. I didn't get drafted. Had no idea how to get drafted, what that meant. Draft came and went. My name wasn't picked. I was like, okay. And then I ended up getting a phone call from Dallas. If you go to onlinesocceracademy.com and you click team and click my name, you can like watch the whole story about this. But long story short, went to Dallas. I was supposed to sign with them. The assistant coach there lied to me. So I had left school early, but was taking online classes. Like, I'd kind of prepared for this. And the guy's like, well, we actually don't need you anymore. After he already told me, I was like leave school, you're signing pro. And I was training 2 or 3 times a day, like getting ready. And then it came down to, I found like a AAA team, the league below MLS, and they were having a paid tryout. Like, you paid money to go try out. I was like, okay, well, it's this or nothing. So I just packed up my car with everything I owned, drove 20 hours to Rochester, New York, balled out. And on day 2, I got a call from Chicago saying they need a player, and your name came up.
Nice.
Yeah, it was amazing. And ultimately, I made the Rochester team, told them politely decline, and went to Chicago and signed there.
And what does that even look like? Like, they call you because obviously they heard something, they knew a little bit about your college career. Maybe somebody had made a call to make an introduction 4 years earlier. But do you show up and they're like, hey, you got to score 2 goals in the next 2 games or do they just sign a contract and you're on the team?
This particular situation was, I'd already gone to Chicago. So the summer before my senior year.
Oh, so they knew you.
Yeah. The summer before my senior year, that same guy, Mr. Pate, made a phone call to another coach of his who was an assistant at Chicago. They invited me up. I balled out in 3 days. I was there. And yeah, I stayed in touch with them. I kept them in the loop. I signed with Dallas. When Dallas canceled, I called up my guy there. His name's Daryl Shore. And he told me that wasn't cool what they did. We don't have a spot for you, but keep us in the loop. I said, great. And that, to me, that's all I want. Just tell it to me as it is. Like, I'm good.
Yeah.
Don't lie to me. And yeah, so Daryl calls me. Actually, Mr. Pate called me. He's like, hey, where are you? Daryl's trying to get in touch with you. Because ironically, they were in Jackson, Mississippi, which is the youth team I played on was in Jackson, Mississippi for that, going to the college ones. So they were there in preseason looking for me because the person they had drafted in like a right fullback position wasn't working out. So my name was next up.
That's wild, man.
Yeah.
Did you know what happened to that guy, by the way, who lost his spot?
Yeah, I took it. I don't know what's happened to him since, but I came up, like, I spoke to Daryl and was like, listen, you know, I kind of got screwed before. I trust you. I just need to know, like, am I competing with 30 people when I come up? Or what am I doing? Because I've got a contract here. And he's like, it's yours to lose, Jared. And I spoke to the head coach and he said something very similar. So I made the chance of, like, I'd rather go up a league and come down versus start low and go up.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just me. And that guy whose spot I took, he had no idea. He was cocky on the field, getting massages, like cutting veterans in line to get a massage and stuff like that, which is just the douchiest thing to do as a veteran. It's so douchey. He had no idea.
I imagine pro sports teams are just like any other locker room or army barracks or anything, there's probably a hierarchy and a pecking order and some hazing. And it's just like, you better know how to play that game because you can't alienate everybody,
goodness.
right?
You better know how to play that game. I mean, I'll tell this to young players. When you get in, like, play your game when it's time to play your game, but be respectful, speak when spoken to, but like, don't overdo it. Carry gear. Be early in the huddle, but don't be first. I would clean up the bagel mess every day. Like, every day, I remember even like barbecue and having our goalkeeper over. His name's Zach Brown. I think he's with DC now. This huge monster of a guy. He was an All-American lacrosse player in college and goalie.
Jesus.
Like, he looks like he could play NFL. He's a monster. And he would yell at everyone all the time. Not me, though. Like,
barbecue goes a long way.
Barbecue goes a long way. I'd always have extras, and like, he would take that too. And I was like, take it, man.
So you mentioned, how many years ago was this? 2000.
I was 05, 06,
so
07, 08.
So almost 20 years ago. The MLS for sure back then is not profitable. You're a undrafted rookie. Do you mind sharing what you made that first year?
Don't mind at all. $12,000.
$12,000. You're a professional. Like, you made it. You're a professional athlete. You're killing it. And you're making $1,000 a month.
Yeah. And they made up some like weird language in the rules so that I was a rookie and could do everything, but they called me something differently so they could pay you even less.
Oh my God. I know, I mean, that's not even minimum wage.
I know, right? I used to tease. I was like, I could make more money at Taco Bell, but for me, that wasn't what it was about.
Oh my goodness! All right, so obviously you have to create a side hustle to pay your bills.
Well, now rookie minimums are like $90,000 or $100,000. Like, you can look up MLS salaries and like you'll see, it's a different game now. It's a much different game. But for me, like, again, it wasn't about that. And like, look, if you're a winner, like, you're gonna find ways. Like, I remember I lived in this beautiful like downtown apartment. Like, the rooftop looked over the lake, and the girl I was renting from was actually the friend of the girl I was dating for a hot minute. And I told her, I was like, look, like, I don't know where you and your friend and I are going to end up. And like, if you're looking for someone to pay the mortgage here, I'm not your guy. But if you're looking for someone to occasionally bring pro soccer players over and like hang out and like, be here when you're back from school, like, I'm your guy. But I can only pay $500 a month. She's like, sounds great.
Amazing.
And like, my view was like, miles of just beautiful scenery. And like, it was phenomenal.
Oh my goodness. So how many years did you play?
I played 2 years at Chicago. I had a pretty bad injury, and another year, like, Puerto Rico. Then my last year was kind of like basically deciding I was going to end it because I had a bad injury.
What was the injury?
I tore my labrum in my hip and groin. I went undiagnosed for a long time. They thought it was a sports hernia. I had that surgery. It didn't work. And like, it was just, the groins are nasty. Like, I wish it would have been a knee because everyone knew how to fix a knee.
Yeah, but does it still give you problems, or is it only like a pro athlete injury would feel it?
It still gives me a little problems. Like, I don't like going side to side too much. I got to warm up if I'm going to do that. And like, when I play, when I'm coaching, like, I'm never going 100% all out, which is fine. I don't need to.
That's wild, man. So 4 years pro. What was it like living in Puerto Rico? That's like, it's kind of on the bucket list for me.
It was, as a pro soccer player, it was a different culture because everything's real slow down there. But it was cool. I lived in like a half decent piece of poop beach apartment. We're like a half block from the beach. We were in this like old San Juan kind of area. It was cool. Had I not been injured while I was there, it'd been even better.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was amazing. Like, I love to kiteboard now and stuff. Like, I'd love to go back to that area. But yeah, it was cool. We'd go out to the beach. We'd drink rum on the beach. I read that book, The Rum Diary, during that time, and it like the plot takes place in the area I was living, and yeah, it was cool.
Great movie, by the way.
Yeah.
Not so good for Johnny Depp because I think that's where he met Amber Heard, and that didn't work out so well for him. But great movie. So tell us about the genesis of Online Soccer Academy.
Yeah, so my first off season as a pro, I did my first soccer camp. Did a couple that summer.
Explain what a soccer camp is for people that don't play soccer.
A soccer camp is like, from a business standpoint, like, I think a lot of the listeners are like sales, mortgage type people. It would be like putting on an event, like a 3-day, 4-day, 5-day event. And instead of learning about sales and mortgages, we're going to learn about soccer. You can do them a couple different ways, but the ones we do are mainly 5 days, and they're like 2 to 3 hours a day.
And this is for kids that want to learn, they're beginners, they want to go pro, they have some talent.
It kind of depends. It's usually like, we coach anywhere from 5 to 18. Most of our soccer camps are like 5 to 12-year-olds.
So what is the skill level at 5 to 12 years old? Is it like Is it like a beehive where they're just all chasing the ball, or are these people, like, at what age does soccer actually get interesting to watch?
Well, it depends what you're watching for.
Yeah.
I'm
not watching for my kids' happiness, because I can watch anything. I can watch paint dry.
If you're watching from the game within the game, it also depends how good of a coach you are. So, 5-year-olds run around like a beehive because they don't know what else to do until you coach them. And I call it paint the picture. So, for example, if I throw a ball out and say, go, you'll see all these kids, 5-year-olds, run around like a beehive. And I'll say, okay, bring it in. I'm going to be the goalie. I have the ball. I'm going to say, go, run to get open. Everyone usually runs forward, north and south. So they're running north to the next goal. I was like, all right, freeze. You get all of them to look at you. All right, Timmy, you go to my left, and I'll literally point or put a cone there. So now they're running east and west. So they're getting wide. So Timmy goes left. Sarah, you go right. Put her on a cone. Billy, you come back, and I'll put him in the middle. There's 3 cones out there. Now they know exactly where to go. It's like, all right, look where you are. All right, now you 3 come back in. I'm going to hold the ball again. When I say get wide now, go. Or spread out. Because spread out to them is just running to the other goal. But once I establish where the cones are, I'll say spread out. See these 5-year-olds spread out. Bring it back in. We do it again. Throw the ball out. Now we start the game. You can't do that for an hour because that'll bore the heck out of anybody, much less 5-year-olds.
Right.
But by the time you do that a couple times, come Friday, you see 5 and 6-year-olds spreading out.
That's pretty impressive.
It's pretty cool.
Hey, this quick interruption is brought to you by me, Scott Groves, the host of the On the Edge podcast. This podcast is brought to you by me. I'm a loan officer who can help you with a mortgage in all 50 states across the United States. I also coach loan officers. So if you are a home buyer who's looking to get a mortgage, if you're a realtor who's looking to partner with an awesome loan officer, or if you're a loan officer looking for coaching, get in touch with me. It's those sources of revenue that allow us to produce this podcast and get out a new episode to you every week for the last couple of years. So if you're looking for a mortgage, if you're looking for a mortgage lender to partner with, or you're looking for a mortgage coach, I'm your guy. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
That's pretty impressive because, like, I've watched some children's soccer and it's painful.
Oh, yeah.
It's really painful.
It is really painful. But those kids will learn like sponges.
Yeah.
If you can coach it to them right and get through to them psychologically. Some kids, their definition of fun is like trying really hard and practicing. Other kids, they want to play video games.
Yeah.
So you got to speak to them a little bit differently and turn the game into a video game.
And so obviously you're running a camp because, one, you need to make money, but there's marketing involved in that. And you got to get, parents to trust you with their kids, and you got to pick a place, and you got to where were the business chops from? Because it sounds like to this point, everything was just like, I am going to be a pro soccer player. Yeah. And then you're like, ta-da, I'm going to also open a business. Like those two things normally don't correspond. They're not in the same Venn diagram.
That's right. So most coaches are terrible business people. No offense to most coaches.
It's 100% true. I've seen it in boxing. I've seen it in jiu-jitsu.
They're just not learning that side, or that's not interesting to them.
Yeah.
So I do want to clarify, for me, it was players first, business second. Like, yes, I needed money, and I wanted to give back and coach kids stuff I know now that I wish I knew at their age. And so the first camp, some of the coaching fundamentals and even the business fundamentals that we had that first camp, like we still do those to this day. We've also improved since then. So I had some business chops in terms of cutting grass as a high school kid, knocking on doors, creating some type of pitch, getting a couple accounts. College, did something similar, realized real quick people weren't paying what they were paying for cutting grass in Louisiana compared to South Florida. So that became car waxing. And I remember asking some of the veterans how they ran camps. Hey, how do you do a camp? None of which had great business insights. And, from there, I can't remember much more. And then kind of ultimately after a couple of those camps in 2008-ish, a friend of mine was into social media. I didn't know what that word was. But at this time, I was filming some of my buddies on the team on YouTube doing a podcast, which was very much like how their story of they went pro, very beyond the glory. And it was awesome. And my friend was like, hey, have you heard of this Gary Vaynerchuk guy? I'm like, nope. Who's that?
This is 2008?
Yeah, this is 2000. No, this was 2006, 7-ish, maybe 8.
Yeah, you're like a super early adopter.
Oh my God, early. Gary Vee was on Wine Library. He was doing his Wine Library shows. And I just remember watching one or two and be like, I could do some of that. And a big pattern I saw back then was there was never a good time for a camp. I would hear that. Still have a great camp, 40, 50 kids at the camp, but not everyone could come. It's a live event. And I was like, oh, if we had it on the internet, they could come anytime they want. And yeah, and from there, it just, back then, it just sort of evolved. And I just never stopped learning ever since, like how to be a tech company, or which essentially it wasn't a tech company. It was a soccer company just using tech.
Right.
You know.
And does online soccer academy like still exist? I mean, obviously the videos are there forever, but are you driving any product or?
It still exists. It exists in the sense that it's a website where those videos live that are more curated, and it drives our soccer camps business. So
the soccer camp business still exists?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know
it was on pause last summer, but yeah, it's been going. We're bringing it back this summer, and I plan to grow it again.
That's wild, man.
Yeah, it's those videos.
Soccer.
I just love it. It's taught me so much. It's taught me so much about business, about coaching. I love the game. It's like, I don't define myself as a soccer player or a soccer coach, but like, you know, my daughter's playing now, her friends are playing, my friends' kids are playing. Like, it's really special to coach them. But like, I mean, just last week in Flagstaff, where one of our businesses are, you know, we announced a partnership with the local club because they've been watching our videos for years. So like, we're going to do a camp. Twilight is their official trash sponsor. You know, it's already gotten 3 referrals into Twilight's business, our janitorial company. And like, I get to go run on a soccer field and like be a mini celebrity. Like, it's pretty awesome.
That is pretty awesome.
And
tell me about your daughter playing and you coaching her, because I 100% have it in me to be the asshole sports parent. Like, for sure, it is in my blood to like scream at the little league ref and be like, that was a strike. Like, I 100% have that in me. And it worries me a little bit to like, sometimes I wonder if I'm not pushing Gabriel specifically hard enough in like jiu-jitsu, because like, I don't want him to hate it. Right. Like at some level, he's really big for his age. So like, even the coaches sometimes will be like, I can just see like maybe the look of disappointment, or a couple times they've like DM'd me on the side on Instagram, be like, hey man, he's not really like paying attention or catching on. I'm like, yes. And it's because all of his peers at jiu-jitsu are 11 and they have a couple year head start, and he's 8. And they're like, oh yeah, I always forget he's only 8. He's so big. Yeah. So it's like, I struggle every day of that balance of like, I want to like set a standard of excellence and do good things and teach him the moves that I've learned, because I started the journey the same time he did. And I also don't want to be that D-bag parent who pushes their kid too hard. So where is that happy medium? Or maybe you also bias towards the crazy side.
I'm not biased towards the crazy side. 20-ish years of coaching kids in soccer has given me a lot of competitive advantage in business and in parenting. I have seen the negative effects of that, right? Like, ultimately I want to win. I'm mainly competing with myself, but I want to win. To me, the most effective way to win is to have people on the team who are feeling good about themselves, not scared out of their mind to make a mistake. And if that's the case, we're going to win more times than not. So like, when I'm coaching, if I see a kid mess up, I'm immediately looking around to see what's happening. Usually, not usually, but if I see that kid look at the sideline for like mommy or daddy or the coach, I'm like, oh, kid's in terrible headspace. You know, and I've had to tell parents like, look, you're paying me thousands of dollars to coach your kid, but if you continue to yell at them, it doesn't matter what I do. Now I say it a little differently, and I also say it fully well, like they might think I'm crazy, call me some names and not pay me again, but that's okay, because that's what I stand for. Our leadership strategy in coaching and in business is like, lead lightly. No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care.
Oh, lead lightly. I like that.
Yeah. And I'm happy to share the doc with you that I wrote on this subject. But there's a couple fundamentals to that. And it's, after the caring piece is there, now I can remove fear. Step 2 is build confidence. Step 3 is empower. Now within that, we're going to coach. It's going to be simply detailed, and it's going to be fun. And for an 8-year-old, the level of pure fun, goofiness, maybe that's 50% of the time, versus an 18-year-old, maybe that goofiness fun is only 10%, 15% of the time, but it needs to be there too.
Yeah.
Otherwise we end up with all these high achieving winners who like don't know how to celebrate the small stuff, and like they're never happy. Like, that's not a good place to be.
Well, right now in America, we have a lot of high achieving teenagers who are killing themselves.
Yeah. And it's because they start to get success. Well, I can speak to being a high achiever and having stuff not go well. And there's just a lot going on mentally, and you're also told never to cry and have these emotions, and like you're just like, what am I doing here? Like, you're not allowed to, like, quote unquote be soft.
Yeah.
Or like curl up in the bed, like exhausted. So for me, you know, even with the refs, right? If everyone's yelling at them, imagine how you stand up when you're nice. You know, I called our AC company today and I was like, listen, I just want y'all to know I really appreciate you and I'm so thankful and yada, yada, yada. And you recently hit me with a bill out of nowhere for something I thought was only going to be 50% less. Y'all didn't even call me. Like, that kind of concerns me. Like, can we talk about this? I might have made a different decision. He's like, they were so apologetic, so nice. They're going to make some calls, whatever. Versus if I would have came at them angry.
Yeah. Serves no purpose.
Yeah. And the reality is most blue collar companies, they're struggling because there's so much demand for their service. They can't keep up. They're not prepared for all that. They're craftsmen, not MBA people, super organized.
Right.
And everyone's yelling at them. And you know, you see that a lot with refs. I'll tell parents, like, look, what is our objective of yelling at them? We're trying to get them to give us decisions more in our favor, maybe. All right, cool. Let's just be nice to them. We'll probably get more decisions in our favor.
Right.
And, you know, ultimately, like with kids, coaching them, there's different ways of doing it, right? I know for me, what I have seen extremely effective is when you show your care and you empower them. You look at some of the top players in the world, they make a mistake. They're not out there crying. They're not putting their head down. They're just getting on with the next play. Now, they also have leaders supporting them, and or they're so big time that if the leader doesn't, they're like, I'm out.
Right.
Which is, I think, what we see as adults when people leave bad bosses. Like, at some point, someone's like, I'm done. I'm not going to listen to that anymore.
Yeah. I don't have any soccer examples because I played like 1 year of AYSO and our kids don't play yet, although I have just been informed by my wife that they will be playing starting this summer, which pains me because sitting out there all day. Yeah, of course. Sitting out there all day watching soccer, it's just not on my fun list. But anyway, I digress. So like in jiu-jitsu, for example, and this is the line that I'm trying to balance with my kids. It's like there's a technique or there's a move. And whether you're a world beater or you're an 8-year-old child who doesn't know his left from his right, you're going to screw up the move 100 times in practice. And then you're going to screw it up 100 times live. And then when you go get somebody better than you, they're going to catch you in that move 100 times. So it's not about getting the move right. What I get really frustrated on, and the 2 times in 3 years that I've been punitive, and Chris was here for a front seat on both of those, is when they like weren't paying attention or they're being disrespectful to the coach, or I could just see that they weren't giving any effort, right? And it's like, if I have a core belief that is just fundamental to who I am as a person, you got to tell Chris.
I was just about to explain the no big deal rule when you make a mistake, and here I am.
Yeah, that we made a mistake. It's
spilling my drink all over me.
Totally cool. So for me, it's like I'm trying to walk that line of like, yeah, just be understanding and supportive, and I like this, like lead lightly, caring, and then also be like, hey, but we set a standard in this family that like in this family we try hard and we're not disrespectful of the coach,
and it's nuanced, right? Like, don't mistake lead lightly for being weak.
Right,
you know, I will yell. I'll yell at my girls, but if I'm calm more times than not, when I do yell, that stands out.
Right.
Because we can be monotone at a really high aggressive, we're always yelling, like people will zone that out. And if I'm also really quiet all the time, people zone that out. So I'm going to mix up my verbiage. Whoa, let's go. Come on. You know, I will mix it up a little bit, almost like a public speaker, keeping attention out there.
Right.
So, you know, there's a couple things to think about here. There's the fear of messing up, and there's respect, et cetera. So a couple examples that come to mind. We see trash on the ground, we pick it up. You walk by trash, I'm telling you, turn around and get it. We are allowed to cry and get a little upset when we lose. We're not allowed to be rude to the other team. We're going to shake hands, even if you're crying. That's okay. We are allowed to make a mistake. We're not allowed to just goof off. I mean, I'll put kids on the line and we'll start running if that's what I need to. I don't like to start with that. I like to start with like, hey, let's bring it in. How do you guys think you're doing? We could be trying harder. Okay, cool. Anything we need to do to try harder? No. We'll try harder. And they'll go try harder. That may not work. I'll try something else. That may not work. Then I'll resort to like fear.
Right.
But if fear,
corporal punishment of running. What do they call that in basketball where you run suicides? Like a quarter, halfway. That's miserable.
We'll do those. And I'll push it right to where they're really out of breath and really like real close. And then I'll be like, all right, we're good.
Yeah.
Grab a sip of water and come back. And then the other thing to keep in mind too about like the not trying piece, this is really interesting, I think, is we sort of develop these psychological profiles, and I'll coach that to our coaches in soccer. We do this in business too. It's just a lot more in depth. But essentially, like someone like you, Scott, I would put you as what we would call a 4-star. That means I could yell at you. I could tell you to try harder. And how are you going to respond?
Probably not so well.
Really? If I told you to try harder, you wouldn't try harder?
If you told me to try hard, well, let's put it this way. If you told me to try harder and I respected you, I would kill myself to try harder. The older I get, the fewer people that I have a lot of respect for.
Yeah. Let's picture like 10-year-old Scott.
Let's picture Coach Young, my high school wrestling coach. If he would ask me to try harder, I would have killed myself.
Okay, great.
Like he asked me one time to lose 8 pounds in a day.
Yeah.
And it was gone in 2 hours.
All right, cool.
Cool.
So that's a good call out. There's the respect there, which is the caring piece.
Right.
We're getting to know.
I knew that guy really cared.
Yep. So you tried hard for him. So someone like you in that situation, I would know I could be more firm with you. I could push you. Like if you weren't doing that well, but hey Scott, come on, you're better than this. Let's go. And you're like, you're right, coach. Come on.
Yeah.
Another kid who's like a 2-star, they don't respond to that. No matter how much you've shown them they cared. Lots of times they don't try because they're so scared of messing up and what the repercussions of that are. Likely because they've got parent figures that yell when they mess up and they expect perfection in all this. So in that case, it's just easier not to try and like put on an attitude because that's easier than getting shamed and embarrassed, even if they can't communicate that to you at a young age. That happens all the time. So for that kid,
totally makes sense.
We're teaching our coaches, even if they're 16, 17 assistant coaches, we're teaching them how to look for that. And the first thing they're supposed to do is not coach that kid, to get down on one knee, ask them if they like to play video games or do art, chit chat a little bit, and then you walk on. Maybe you do it one more time. Then you start to like intertwine something with soccer with their art interests or video games, and you usually see that kid improve throughout the week. But ultimately they go home and they're in that psychological environment that's not safe, and that makes it hard. So like I try to keep that in mind too. Of like even now with adults, like I did a lot of research around like minimum wage workers, and sometimes you got people like they're not that talkative at the cashier counter, and it's not because they're not. It's just because they're depressed. And they're hating their life. And they were like a high-achieving high school person. They're just stuck in this job. And if you can talk to them and like think through that perspective, next thing you know, they open up, you start hearing their story, and you're like, holy crap, I got like a real winner here for minimum wage.
And translating this to your business experience, which I want to talk about a little bit.
Yeah.
The people that are the 2-star, the 3-star, where it's like I believe everybody has potential. And I actually got into a pretty healthy argument with some leadership of my current company about people's potential. And I believe everybody has potential, right? And when you find somebody that's either stuck in that minimum wage job, or maybe they really feel that that's the best they can do, is there a leadership technique? Is there, I just have to care more? Is there a point where you can pay them a little bit more and you'll get more out of them because they feel more valued? Like
I don't think it has to do with pay. Sorry to cut you off there. And if you see me writing, this is me like taking little notes so I don't totally cut you off. But
yeah, no, that's good.
Put out my cigar 3 times and spilled my beer. I'm struggling to keep up with it. So I believe everyone has potential. If you go to giverfly.com and click what is a Giverfly, this will explain more. But essentially,
and Giverfly is the VC fund that you set up to like fund businesses. And
yeah, I mean, on paper it's not considered a VC fund, but it's like a portfolio that owns businesses. But yes, there is
Giverfly.
And it's inspired by this book, Give and Take, from Adam Grant. And he's an organizational psychologist, has a lot of TED Talks. But in the book, he puts people in 3 different categories: givers, matchers, and takers. And in the book, and the way I usually frame this to people is like, givers give without expecting anything in return. Matchers, like they only give if they get something in return. They likely give first. And takers are kind of, they just take, suck the life out of you and then move on. Tend to be more the narcissist. And in the book, he's like, who do you think are the least successful people in the world? And the answer is givers. Think like your teachers who can't say no, the person who's always doing more and, they're just burnt out. And he says, who's the most successful? And a lot of people will say matchers or takers, but really the answer is givers. But they learn to set boundaries, right? So
I've heard this before. Maybe it was from that book about like, the go-giver mentality of like, just give till it hurts and the world will repay you. It's like, no, kind of, you have to be like a strategic giver.
Yes,
he uses some terms like that, right?
You have to be strategic, and, you know, like a taker is going to be like, oh, that's narcissistic, that's manipulative, whatever, because that's the lens they see it through. But, you know, I believe in this strongly, and, you know, I've benefited from this, and now I have like terminology to put it to, but like the successful giver, if they get asked the question over and over again, they don't keep answering it. They make a video.
Right.
How to kick a soccer ball, viewed 2 million times. I can give while we're sitting here on this podcast. The next level is going to be when someone asks that question. Now, I'm not going to send them that video. My assistant's going to send them that video with the rules set I put together. Or instead of always taking meetings, I'm going to have office hours. And if you're not strategically important at this time, but you want my attention, then, well, you might have to book me 2 months out, but I've got time for that. And so this idea of like everyone deserves a chance, like, so the successful giver is giving more people more times at bats. And I've seen that play out. I know I do something like that where it's like, I'm going to give them a certain amount of chances. I'm going to try to coach them this way, that way, this way. Ultimately, if they're not going to do it, it's on them. I've given them a couple chances, and then I sort of have my own boundaries. Because what happens with unsuccessful givers, they keep pouring in, and that person who's not trying, they're taking all their life, and then they're successful people, they're now not paying attention to them. So even at our camps, we have to coach coaches. It's very easy to get locked in on the one kid who's not trying that hard because you want to help. That just means you care, and I love that. But what about these other 10 kids? They need your attention too. So you give them a minute, give it all you got, then you got to move on.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you're doing the best you can, but at some point, it's either them or your family.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I'm thinking through your evolution as like an adult, right? So you go from like professional athlete to effectively professional coach through Online Soccer Academy to professional business owner to now owner of mini businesses. And that is not a likely path, right? Because it's like a lot of great players, AKA people that make it pro, they don't really know how to coach. And then to your point, a lot of coaches, they coach because they have a deep understanding of the game, but they probably don't have the business insight. And then moving to like business, like, I don't know, is it innately, do you feel like you have high IQ, EQ, where you're just willing to put in the work and do all the trial and error necessary? Because this evolution from like doer to coach to owner, that can't be normal. I just can't, I can't imagine there's a lot of people with those same credentials. It's like they were either a player and now they're washed up and over the hill, or maybe they were a player and they could convert that to coaching to teach other people to do that amazing skill that they used to do. Or maybe they were never a great player, but they could coach and they could kind of understand the business aspect. But having evolved your way through all three, and it's not like you're 70 years old, it's pretty impressive, man. So just like taking a moment to celebrate the win.
Thanks.
What do you think that's from? Or why do you think you've been able to do that?
A couple things I wrote down here. Players, not all players know how to coach, EQ, and hard work versus smart work. So let's start with the hard work versus smart work. So I like to say hard work is easy, smart work is hard.
That a truer statement has not been said on this podcast.
So,
because you can always grind more. You can always
grind more, right? You can always grind more. And it's like you talk about becoming, right? And all the messages out there is work hard, grind till you drop. Like even Gary Vee. It's been really interesting to watch. Like I was fortunate to be in Gary Vee's Crush It book, which was super cool. And like I got to pick him up at the airport, drive him to a place. Like it was awesome. It's been neat to see him evolve from like grind till you drop to more of the mental game.
Kids will do that to you.
Yeah, right. So like even Cody Sanchez, I'm a big fan of Cody Sanchez, by the way, for anyone who watched her. She didn't have any kids. I'd like to see how she evolves when she has kids.
Yeah.
Again, she's awesome. Learn a ton from her. But to me, it was just like, you know, I remember like, so camp started getting more popular in 2008, 9. You'd have 50 kids on the field. I got multiple coaches. I literally couldn't be on the next field over, but I still needed all those kids to improve. So by default, like I had to get good at coaching coaches. And then that meant writing down your thoughts and beliefs and hiring for that and training for that. And also, you know, these are like 16 to early 20-year-old high school and college kids that are my assistant coaches. And we've since had some staff coaches. So you got to break it down real simple. So yeah, I mean, it's your whole life, work hard. And then at some point, I mean, look at Dan Sullivan at Strategic Coach. People pay him 30 to 50 grand a year to be told to not work hard and to take a break and to build systems and processes and hire effectively. which I find hilarious. But like I started like figuring some stuff out on my own, and then I started reading and learning a ton. And I would just read and study, and I would sort of see patterns across leaders in sports and business. And there was this massive psychological component to what I see. Steve Kerr, I'm a big fan of it.
Amazing guy.
Yeah. And, he says coaching's 90% creating a culture people want to be in, 10% X's and O's. And he says, if I do my job right, by the end of the year, I'm sitting there with my legs crossed watching the game happen. That is, at a pro sports level, that's really hard to say, because like most people be like, well, what if he's not doing anything? He shouldn't have a job. And it's like, well, would the team be doing that good if he wasn't able to just sit there?
Right.
So, but smart work is hard, right? Because now we're playing into our own psyche, not to mention everyone else's psyche, because I need to make, I got to make less money in short term in order to build ops, get into the boring stuff, build out hiring profiles, etc. That's hard to do. A lot of people have a hard time saying no to short-term money to do that. And to put your feet up and read a book or to get an assistant. You said it once. The time to hire an assistant when you're at 80% bandwidth. Most people are at 130% bandwidth, burning out. And they hear the word assistant, they're like, that sounds crazy. They can't even pass off work. It's not they don't want to, they just can't slow down enough. And then, so the emotional piece, like, this has always been big for me. And I'm realizing more and more, like, I emotionally outgrew my parents at like 12. I thought through, like, there's certain moments in my youth career where I was like, damn, that's a big leadership moment. And it has nothing to do with playing the game. It's the off-field stuff. And helping players improve quicker because of a psychological piece, which is now lead lightly. I didn't have words for it back then. Back then it was like white-collar smarts versus blue-collar heart. Now it's a little easier to understand. But my EQ's been high, and I've been studying a lot of that stuff. And then the last kind of piece is a lot of great players, they're not good coaches because the game just came really easy to them.
Yeah.
Whereas like for me.
Not that they got off working easy. They still had to work hard to get to that level, but conceptually the game came easy to them.
The game just came easy to them, right? And for me, I had to teach myself. And like, I just juggled a lot as a kid. I didn't do any tricks because I never saw tricks. But in college, I saw these English guys doing tricks, so I had to watch them, study them. Okay, what are they doing? What's their foot doing? Like, I wasn't getting pieces of paper out, but this was going through my mind. Now, if you watch our videos, they're very clearly broken down. Do this, do this, do that. If this is happening, it's likely because of this. It's like writing computer code, except for teaching how to kick a ball. So yeah, for me, I had to self-teach myself because like I was learning by watching other players. I wasn't learning from coaches. They were just telling me to kick harder, try harder.
Run faster.
Like, okay, great. My speed and strength coach wasn't though. He'd break that down, And I shouldn't have been lifting close to 250 coming out on bench of high school, but he broke it down so good.
It's so funny because I boxed for almost 10 years and with like very good amateur boxers, like very good. These are guys that had 40, 50 quality amateur fights and just not good enough to go pro, or they had pro and then just got a brutal knockout inside. That was enough. So it's like I worked with some really good guys and then coincidentally moved up to Valencia and worked with Fernando Guerrero, who has, I don't know, I think he's like 37-3 and like all 3 of his losses are title fights.
Wow.
He was like 3 wins away from being Mayweather. As a matter of fact, I think one of his losses maybe was to Mayweather. And it's just like, this guy is world class. He's shy of being a household name by like 3 rounds in 3 fights. And when he showed me how to box, I took like 4 or 5 classes from him before we moved to Vegas. When he showed me like positioning of legs, positioning of hips, like instead of just standing here waiting for a punch, you should be kind of in a stance where you're about ready to take off on a sprint. And I'm like, that makes sense why Manny Pacquiao, when he's, 120 pounds, his calves look like mahogany because he's just like constantly in this ready to sprint stance. And I was like, oh yeah, this is the difference of like somebody who, is an amateur and somebody who just really understands it at the highest possible level and then can also articulate it. Like, it breaks my heart that Fernando Guerrero made enough money to be happily retired and just like teach a kid's boxing class, because this guy should be teaching like the next generation of pro fighters. He's so good. And he's one of those guys where I don't think it came particularly easy from him. He had to learn all the X's and O's. So now he can articulate the X's and O's, where some of these other amateur guys, it came easier to them, but they never had to put in the work that would have allowed them to get to the highest level. So that's interesting that you talk about like seeing these other guys and then having to make all these mental notes of teaching yourself.
Yeah. And also it's like feeling some losses early in your career, right? Like I knew players at the pro level, they're like 19. They were babied their whole life. They were always the best youth national team. The first bit of adversity they had as a pro, not starting, 19 and not starting, for me, that was no big deal. That's just what I did. I'm not a starter. Great. I'm gonna work my ass off to get on the team.
Yeah.
It's 19-year-old kids crying about it, whining about it, complaining to the coach about it. I'm like, I mean, I remember being like, what's wrong with you, man? And you know, and also like the best American players that did well in Europe, there's a lot more now. They tend to be the smarter players, not just the big athletic ones. Big athletic ones only make it so far in America. Then they go to Europe where everyone's smart and athletic, and they struggle.
Yeah.
Because they're not thinking as fast. They're not seeing the game as fast.
Yeah. So I want to come back to this idea of like, you know, you go from performer, player to coach to kind of using your coaching chops to build this online business and learn in the early days of what is social media / YouTube. Like your channel must have been really early on YouTube if you're posting content in, you know, 2007, 2008, around there. So of all that time that you spent soccer camps, soccer, you know, bouncing around the league, etc., like what are the top 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 lessons? Maybe you can distill it all the way down to one that's now carried you onto this business where you're like, oh yeah, I can go into a business I know nothing about, janitorial supplies, buy this business, help turn it around, manage it, make all the mistakes, you know, hopefully realize all the profits and the exit one day. Like what are the professional athlete / coaching lessons that have got you to where you are performing in business? Because I mean, we could go into it, but the online soccer academy and then the bar academy fitness studios and then the janitorial company, which is a departure from everything you know. Like what are the lessons that have come out of what you've done so far that are translating to business?
So many. So I want to highlight the janitorial. So it actually wasn't a turnaround. It was a great company. And I think the learning from others and studying and watching, you know, the same way I'd watch people kick a soccer ball and be like, oh, I've never seen that before. Let me try that. You know, his name's Terry O'Neill. He's retired in Florida now. He's like a second dad to me. It's been awesome. But I'd watch him like clean a bathroom. I'm like, okay, cool. Talk to me. What are you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm doing this. Okay. All right. Why are you doing that? Why in that order? You just start asking these questions and you're building out all the ops code from his head and getting it down on paper and filming it. So then we can train it, right? Like our ability to make training so fun that, you know, I'd watch dads. I'm like, oh, did you play soccer? They're like, no, I just watched your videos. I was like, oh, cool. So a lot of those frameworks for how we do it, and I could get into detail of like, you know, the framework of the video, the how-to. You start applying that into janitorial, bar fitness, sales coaching, whatever. It's kind of a similar framework.
But see, here's the thing. Your brain says similar framework. My brain says, wait a minute. I'm thinking you bought a janitorial company to come in and like build the sales force and use your connections to get more contracts and do economies of scale so that the product is cheaper and then turn around and exit the company and be done with it. And you're like, no, I wanted to film tutorials on how to properly clean a corporate bathroom at a strip mall.
Well,
that blows my mind.
Yeah. So our thesis is buy and build and hold forever. Having said that, if we do that right, we could sell it for the most value at any point. But that's not our intention. I guess how far do we want to go deep down that rabbit hole?
Yeah, I mean, like, I wouldn't have thought that, like, the owner of the company who's bringing in the venture capital money would be like, yeah, dude, we need to get in there and learn how to clean toilets and, like, film a tutorial.
Yeah.
That's bonkers.
Yeah, well, for me, your product is labor, and you actually have a massive labor force. It's very underrated. I call it human capital arbitrage. I think Cody Sanchez would love this. Maybe Justin Donald's listening. He'll share it with her. It's a phenomenal labor force. We got everything from like the grandma who can't sit still to the young and hungry college kid. You actually have a book on your desk over there called Paper Cuts. Mm-hmm. And his name Brent. What's Brent's last name? Perkins.
Oh, I can't. You're gonna have to put this in the podcast, Chris. The book Paper Cuts. You're gonna have to look up the author.
So I met him at Front Row Dads Live, not this past year or the year prior. And he went to NAU, which is where our janitorial company is in Flagstaff. Guess what? He's a two-time former CEO. Guess what his job was in college?
Cleaning toilets.
Janitor.
No shit.
Yep. Hungry as could be janitor.
Who was it, Chris? Brent, what's his last name?
Perkins.
Perkins, okay.
Yeah, Brent Perkins. And so, like, that's fascinating to me. Also, you know, I'm always building, like, my next up leaders, my next people. And part of that is having a training ground for them to go perform in. You say you're trustworthy? Cool. Go clean some buildings for 6 months. Let's see how you do when you got the keys and the alarm codes.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, and it's an also phenomenal business because you're in there at night. It's very meditative. You're cleaning. You're doing physical work. You're getting the bilateral stimulation on. So for that young and hungry, we have a whole recruiting framework around get paid to learn.
Tell me more about that.
So a lot of people have a job to get paid. I think there's some interesting stuff in the world right now. Anyway, for me, it's like, okay, if you can get a minimum wage in Flagstaff is like almost $18 an hour. You can go get $18 an hour as a server or a janitor. Most people would take the server job. It's like, cool, let's talk about your goals and what you want to do. Over here, you're going to learn, we're just going to put a number on it. Let's call it 10 grand in like business coaching throughout the year. So now you're going to take your $15 an hour job and comp it to another one, and we're going to give you $15K. Because one of our owners is Jared Motz, and he gets to be on really cool podcasts like this, you know, like there's a lot of value in that. And you're going to listen to certain audiobooks we provide you and pay for.
As they're doing the cleaning.
Because now they get that bilateral stimulation going. They can be writing down their ideas, audio journaling, whatever. And in the process, you know, cleaning's very engineering driven. You clean high to low, left to right. It's a process. You learn that process. You can apply that in most businesses. So yeah, for me, it was like, cool, where can we come in with competitive advantages that we have? One, we're really good at recruiting and training people and the psychology. We can make it fun. You know, like the old man Terry taught me how to find the trash cans. He's like, you know, you go in a room and you go in a circle and you don't want to miss a trash can because that's a big symbol that you didn't do it. So you'd like have a gun out. So we're building training where you have a dart gun and you move through the room like you're in a first person shooter. And when you see that trash can, you shoot it. And then you bag it. The guy behind you comes in and ties in the new bag. You kind of make it fun. And to me, that's a huge competitive advantage because we got to get labor in there, keep labor for a while. And, you know, time is money in that business. So yeah, just the ability to kind of like learn from others and feel confident that regardless of the subject, I could learn it and then we could coach it. And, you know, where other companies, maybe they take 4 weeks to get someone really up to speed, we could do it in a week. That's a big deal.
Because I got to imagine any minimum wage job, not your company, not janitorial, any minimum wage job has high turnover.
It does. We've had people for years. This guy built a good foundation. We have new people coming in, and they're also looking for growth. We got one guy, he moved from Phoenix to come work for us in Flagstaff.
I remember you telling me about this guy that you're very bullish about.
This guy, there's been a couple of them, but this guy's story is really cool. He recently just repped out a couple of pull-ups for the first time in years, which is like pretty neat. And a lot of that motivation stuff comes from like being around us and our team up there. And, you know, we had another guy who's going through AA and in his big talk, like cited Twilight and our team for setting goals again. And
the fact that, you know, I mean, this is just why I love you to death, man. Like, and why I just know you're a great human being is like the fact that you know that one of your minimum wage employees' big wins was getting physically healthy enough to be able to do pull-ups. Like that just speaks volumes about who you are as a leader. And it's like, this is an awesome masterclass in how to care about people. But is that doable at scale? So let's say you expand past Flagstaff into all of Arizona, into all of Nevada. Like you can't know the personal goals of 4,000 employees. Right. How do you scale?
I don't talk to this person. He doesn't talk to me. He reports into someone else who reports into someone else who reports into me.
Got it.
I happen to follow him on Facebook. So there's systematic ways to do this, right? Like an easy example is when I traveled for soccer camps, I wrote handwritten thank you notes. Okay. Are our coaches going to do that? I don't know. They might. Well, if we put it into the checklist and provide them with handwritten thank you notes and have them take a photo of that at the end of their camp, they're going to do it more times than not. And it also depends on like, where do you put priority? So for me, you know, I think about stuff as the leaders, like my KPIs, there's numbers and stuff, but there's also like, all right, cool. When the leaders get up, are they pushing their chairs in, or are those chairs just flying to the back wall and they're moving on to the next thing? If they're not pushing their chairs in, then they're not in the right headspace. They're in a survival headspace. And so systematically, the way we're slowly, you know, certain business, we're building some of this stuff out is in the checklist, little things like that are happening. Okay, manager, what are the personal goals of your key people? You don't know them? Okay, go find them out. And then as they get in their reports, certain things get reported up so that, you know, we can see that. Or building out, okay, we have a new hire, leader gets tagged on the Kanban board to film a video. Video gets put in, assistant texts it to the new hire.
Yeah. And
now I can knock out 10 videos in 20 minutes.
How many people do you think can be managed at that level, right? So I always think of like a team in Army Special Forces. It's like they have 12 guys, you know, so they can break down into 6-man teams. And I think the Navy SEALs do it the same way. And the military is probably still the best at small team leadership. So it's like, you know, the idea is maybe your scope of really pouring into people is 4, 10, 20, maybe. Yeah. How many people do you think in a business, like how many direct reports can somebody have before they lose focus on the person, and now all of a sudden they're looking for the, you know, the other company where the grass is greener because they'll pay them 50 cents more an hour?
Yeah, that's a big one. So for context, we bought Twilight at 20-ish people. We've got like mid-30s now and a recruiting waiting list of people to join us, which is pretty cool. Our Pure Bars, we have maybe 30-ish or so total. So, you know.
And in Pure Bar, those 30 people are pouring into how many students?
Yeah, they're pouring into
a couple hundred.
Yeah, a couple hundred members. One studio's creeping up on 300. The other one's 150-ish.
Congrats on the recovery, because I know COVID.
I was just about to throw out an FU COVID.
Yeah. I know COVID was a little rough on that.
The last couple of years have been challenging. So I just want to give context in general. I'm only speaking from the experience I have,
right?
What I've read and learned from others, and then theory.
Yeah.
So I do and this is also interesting too, right? Because like not every business is the same. So janitorial, for example, you know, we have some team members, they're very self-sufficient. They get their supplies, they go out and do their same partner accounts, their locations over and over again. They don't need like day-to-day management.
Right.
Pure Bar, I'm making some shifts with our sales team over there. We got like 8-ish or so people doing sales. They need a manager. They're also kind of part-time. They're more like, this is like a second job to them. Some of that's shifting as well. So it's a little tricky, right? Like versus like, I'm guessing in a traditional mortgage company, you have a manager, you have 8 full-time people. I think 8 is what I've read. Yeah. It's kind of like starting to hit a cap. So for me, I think about it in terms of being a successful giver. How can I reach as many people at scale as I can and show that personal touch? So that means when I come to town, we're having a barbecue. And when that barbecue is going on, I already know ahead of time some of the notes of what's going on. We have like an internal CRM. I know names as best I can. I'm down on one knee. I'm picking, you know, we've got these ladies on our team, you know, they speak Spanish. I'm using Google Translate app to try to talk to them. I'm offering to pick up their plates and just asking about their kids. And that's very unnormal for them. And that's way more than most do. And like, that's enough to show I care, but I don't need to go any deeper than that. Cause if I know way more than them and I'm involved in every little decision, then everything else is going to fail.
Right.
So it's like this sort of, you know, balance.
And what are you guys looking for at Giverfly? What are you guys looking for in businesses you're acquiring? Is this the Cody Sanchez? They have a good model. It's a baby boomer whose kids don't want to take over the business. And, you know, maybe they're missing the technology piece or the, you know, the MBA piece of it. Or
so put together this thesis before I knew who Cody Sanchez was. I didn't even know like this was really a thing. I just knew COVID hit and really messed up. Like I couldn't do soccer camps and we couldn't do fitness studios. Like fitness studios were cut in half, 50% capacity. Yeah. It was like, okay, well, you know, as you heard, I made $12,000 a year as a pro soccer player. I wasn't exactly living off that. Like I was going to have to do something. And anyway, so for our thesis, we probably did 150-ish hours of like research, learning, et cetera. And that boiled down to we buy local businesses from caring owners looking to retire. The deeper kind of Justin Donald.
Say that one more time.
We buy local businesses from caring owners looking to retire.
Love it. That's a great business thesis.
We We sought after maybe 12. We got 10 replies pretty darn quick with our outreach. And we closed on a winner. And there's a couple pieces to that. And then it goes deeper, right? Like I could send you a doc offline. That's our exact investment thesis. And I say Justin Donald because he sort of has these frameworks. He puts things through, like if you read Lifestyle Investor. So we have a framework. Here's the top 5 questions. If you answer yes to these, you move to 6 through 10. If you've answered yes to these, you pursue the next step and some more due diligence. You keep unlocking. And for us, one of the most important pieces is the caring. If that leader, if that owner isn't a caring person, we're out. And the reason for that is culturally, we're going to line up with them. A caring person likely did what they said they were going to do. They treated their customers right. They treated their team right. And they just did a good job. Another thing we look for is minimal to no marketing.
Right.
Like, and that's what this business was. This guy had like a close to 400K profit business, and he was a snowboard coach during the day, and he did no marketing. He has one Google from 2019. It's beautiful. And we've inherited so much goodwill. And that person is also looking for an ownership group that will care for their people. Yes, a financial outcome is important, but it's not the most important. So when we come in, we talk about caring and listening to their story. Kind of sounds like lead lightly.
Yeah.
And we can go deep real quick with them in the relationship. And then, because ultimately, it's not like real estate. You know, there's a lot of moving pieces. Most small businesses, you know, we're looking at 1 million net and below for us. Like where private equity doesn't play, but it's too big for most like average Joes to take.
Yeah, you can't take like a second mortgage SBA loan to get $1 million, but private equity could care less if you're under 10 million bucks.
That's right. And so we're also, you know, as much as they're looking at us, we're qualifying them, which I think is what good salespeople do. And, you know, can they go the distance? Are they going to work as a team with us? Are they going to screw us over once we close this deal?
Right. Yeah, because it's interesting, right? You want the departing owner to be as involved as you need them to be to help hand off the business, but not so involved that they want to go start a competitor, you know, 12 months and 1 day after the non-compete is done.
That's right. That's right. And you also need them motivated to actually do it, you know, because it can be scary. This guy did this for 21 years.
Yeah.
He actually told me at one point, like after our first in-person meeting, we had a couple calls. He told me, he was like, Jared, I'm scared. I was like, why? And he said, I don't know what I'm going to do for money. I don't know. He's like 67. That stood out for a couple things for me, but one, it stood out from like, wow, I don't think I've ever seen a 67-year-old man share feelings. Like, wow, that's impressive. And yeah, for us, like he did everything he said he was going to do and then some in his 30-day contractual agreement. And we talk once a week, a year and a half later.
It's awesome.
It's incredible. And we actually hired him as a consultant once to come out. Like he's done a lot for us. I've also done stuff for him. So it's been like, he's a giver. We're a giver. We did have him come back to Flagstaff for a couple of days. We paid him a janitor consulting fee. He had a lot of fun. We had fun. We were doing some floor care stuff that was outside of our world. But yeah, so that's, let me know how much farther you want to go with that.
No, it's great, man. I think just the business tip of being able to watch and learn just that simple thing, it just speaks volumes, right? We talked to a buddy of mine, Isaac Stegman, and he told me a couple of things that really stuck out as far as business goes. And like, this is going to be one of those things, right? Of like, watch and learn, because there's so much you can take apart. And then also systematizing the stuff, like having a CRM for your own team, like so powerful, right? Like, I don't necessarily like it when my company sends me a happy birthday thing because it feels canned and it feels silly.
Authentic is important, right? Like, right. It can't be cheesy. It needs to be, you know, even in some of our sales stuff, like people like use this template. I'm like, no, it's got to look like it's written. Like you do we call it text small.
Yeah. When I get a printed birthday card, that's like clearly just went around the table and everybody signed 100 of them at one time. It's like, come on, man. I know. I don't really care. Yeah. On the flip side, if all of a sudden, and I've made a lot of money for a lot of companies in the mortgage space. On the flip side, if somebody had that internal CRM and, you know, sent me a $100 steak gift certificate on Halloween and said, hey, I know it's your wife's birthday today. She always gets screwed because her birthday is on Halloween and you have kids. Take her out for a nice steak dinner this weekend. That would mean the world to me.
We call it tech small. And that means think like an efficient tech company, care like a small business.
I like that.
I see
lead lightly and tech small.
I see so many small business owners. They care so much and they end up in unsuccessful giver territory. They're just pouring their heart into everything. They're burnout, and at some point they hate people. They just got beat up, but their heart was right. And then I see these tech companies where, my goodness, they're so efficient, but they lose the human touch. You know, the reality is great tech is run by humans. And so what we like to do is business A might be much farther along in their ops than business B, but we're heading towards this place of like very organized, efficient processes with these small business touch points. You know, the end of our checklist sometimes might say, give yourself a high five, you did it, or film a loom and give a shout out to someone in Slack, a personal one. And even then we're teaching how to give shout outs, not for outcomes, but for like the process. And
right.
And so like this whole tech small thing is extremely important. It's very nuanced and not a lot of people get it. Like to me, I like to do sales through giving. You know, we might have a janitorial contract that's $100K a year to go clean someone's building. Cool. That particular person doesn't need a crappy birthday card like you described. But if we can easily see they're on 2 nonprofit boards in the community and we go donate it's called day porter, like when you're cleaning during the day and keeping things fresh in the bathroom, whatever, we'll donate day porter service to their nonprofit events. So maybe that's a couple $100 in hours, but now their event, because everyone forgets about the trash until it's blowing all over your event. And now your high-priced donors are picking up trash. Well, there's Twilight picking up trash. And that means the world to them. They appreciate that. And for us, it's phenomenal business because now our product that no one ever sees because it happens at night is happening during the day.
Yep.
Now we start adding some branding touches, which is what I love doing. You know, our crew's going to be walking around in yellow Converse because it represents a 1950s janitor who cares. And they're flipping bags up in the air and tying them tight, and dropping them in the can. And, you know, our sales team is undercover putting out some of those things. It's like a win-win-win.
Yeah, and that goes so much further than sending a $200 bottle of wine on Christmas that gets mixed in with all the other bullshit.
So much further. Even the timing of it. Like everyone's doing it at Christmas. Let's do it at a different time. And I don't have that down the way I want, but it's pretty darn good for what we do. I did want to circle back. I wrote down a couple lessons as a pro from soccer that translate into business.
Go for it.
There's many of them, but a few lately that have really stood out to me as I continue to kind of grow is this idea of, so we'll start with this one. Hard workers on a soccer field, when your hardest worker on the soccer field isn't running anymore, you know everyone needs a break. Let's take a rest. It's really clear. Scott Groves, Scott Groves tries and he can't go anymore. The rest of the team likely needs a break too. In business, our hard-working high achievers can fake it. They can fake it with a smile. They can fake it with toxic positivity. They can fake it with drinking. You know, they can fake it and be like, yes, boss, I got that. You know, they're absorbing everything you say versus being like, hold on, like I can't do this. So this last year or two, I've really tried. And now I'm like really pumped because like my closest 8-ish people are all really vulnerable and sharing how it really is now instead of faking it to me. And part of that is like them having the safe space to say, hey, I can't do anymore. Because your hardest working players in the field, they don't come out of the game. Even when by staying in the game, we're not doing as well.
Right.
You have to pull them out. You have to mentally say, it's okay.
Yeah. They'll play injured.
You know, I'm almost tearing up right now. Like, it's okay. You did the best you could. We love you. You got an injury. You're coming out.
Right.
And they're just like, you can see the shoulders.
Oh, thanks.
But our business people, like, it's so easy for them to keep going.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they're going to burn out. And they'll either go out like a victim and leave you, or, you know, at some point it's going to burst. So, you know, I'm trying to implement these more of like emotional check-ins and just holding space. Front row dads, that was a big thing I learned in front row dads, just hold space.
Yeah.
What the hell does that mean, John Froman? What the hell does that mean? You mean literally just hold space to have some food and like, how are you? Oh, I'm good. Not really.
Right.
How are you?
Right.
Tears. So now, like, we regularly do these emotional check-ins. Our meetings, you know, they start with like a couple positives, some things that are happening. Like, how are you? Let's take 5 minutes. Everyone just take a breath, zen out, then come back to the start of the meeting. Like, check out of the day-to-day, check into the high level. And then creating that safe space where I'm going to have more respect for you if you tell me you're really hurting versus if you don't. But that's hard. Because if you're 40 and you've never had anyone tell you that, shoo, that's hard. And then the other thing I wrote down here is staying together as a team. So in soccer, you typically have a defensive line, a midfield line, and a forward line. And lots of times what happens is as you move up the field, and the spacing between the lines can be whatever it's going to be. Ideally, the coach has to set the culture and set the strategy. But let's just call it 15 yards of spacing between defense, midfield, and forward. Because what will happen is the forward line goes and attacks the goal. The midfield line might step up, and now the defensive line and the midfield line are 30 yards apart. That's a lot of open space for the other team to get the ball and attack you. Versus if the defensive line has moved up, now there's 15 yards. What's also happens is the midfield will over-attack, and now there's only 5 yards of space between them and the forwards, and it's just too clustered. It's real cluttered in there. And so in soccer, when I'm coaching, we'll work on, and pro teams will do this, I kind of have my own little spin on it, but we'll work on exercise where you're just walking. We're all moving up, we're all moving back, we're moving left, we're moving right, kind of staying as a unit. This person steps up, back line shifts across the right, because over here isn't that dangerous. Then we do it at a jogging pace, then we do it with the ball out. You just step by step. And I find what's happening a lot in business is leaders can get spread out real quick. Leader over here is doing this, leader over here is doing that. Are we off strategy? We're on strategy.
Yeah, sales is left behind. Ops is way behind or way too clustered.
Yeah. Marketing doesn't know what's going on. Ops is like, we can't handle more. Sales is like, what the hell? How am I supposed to sell if we can't even keep up with the work? Like, but the reality is for like janitorial, for example, you're not selling tech. You're not selling some financial product. You can only sell so much that ops can support. So now you need ops and recruiting and sales to sort of work in unison, and marketing.
Yeah.
Right? Until you get to this point where, okay, now sales can just sell because recruiting's humming, everything's humming. And that's been a visual. I've been able to kind of tell that story and play in my mind more, where it's just so easy. Like, we live in this world with Slack and this and that. I'm telling some of our teams, like, look, we do 2 or 3 Slack messages and we're still having the same convo in Slack. Pick up the phone.
Right.
Pick up the phone.
Oh my gosh.
Because you have so many variables in your head. I don't know. I'm thinking, it's like, oh my God, so much wasted energy is going into, if we were in the same building, you would just come in my office and we would talk. And that's what's really tricky about this world we live in now of like working remote and working at home and this omnichannel world. All this communications, we call it 10-4 communications in our businesses. Like, you're teaching these kind of things. Like, if we don't know how to use a walkie-talkie, how on earth are we going to talk? You know?
That's so good, because I can think of many, many, many times. Like, I'm picturing these forward players and these midfielders and these defensive men, like all 9 of them kind of moving in unison up and down the field and keeping equal spacing. I can think of lots and lots of example where, like, in a typical mortgage company, you have leadership, sales, which is the loan officer, and then you have ops, like the processors and stuff. And they're forget about 15 yards off. They're miles apart, right? And it's like sales is going a million miles an hour and just no respect for ops, or ops is overwhelmed or underwhelmed. Yeah. And they're just like, they're not on the same page. Leadership is not setting the tone. And then if for whatever reason, whether it's just workload or stylistically or whatnot, you've got a coach that's kind of just got a blind eye to it, you know, it just all falls apart. And people, ironically, rarely leave mortgage companies because of, you know, bad rates at a given time, or we're missing a product or something. They leave because this distance between sales and ops, or between sales and leaderships, it just gets, it's a chasm. And they're like, I'm just not seeing eye to eye with my ops people anymore. Ops doesn't understand that without me, they don't have a job. And then sales doesn't understand, like, well, without ops, you have no reputation. And, you know, it's just, this is a beautiful, I don't know shit about soccer, but that was like a beautiful visual. I wrote it down here in my book, because I'm going to go over that with our coaching group tomorrow. Dude, I could talk about business with you forever, but I want to close it down just because I've got my kid here who wants to go have dinner. But I always like to end the conversation with 2 questions. One, you know, we're filming this. This will probably be out like April or May of 2024. So early-ish part of 2024. What are you most looking forward to, either professionally, personally, family, whatever? What are you most looking forward to the rest of this year in 2024? And then what's your favorite movie and why? And then I guess for you, I also have to ask, what's your favorite type of soccer to watch? Are you like a Premier League guy? Or are you still a huge MLS fan? Or like, feel free to answer any of those 3 questions. Or do you just wait and only watch it every couple of years during World Cup?
Let's start with the watching one. I was writing those down. actually don't watch a lot of soccer, and I take naps during the games.
Okay, perfect.
Even as a pro, we would like Champions League would be on, and the guys were watching it, and I would like eat lunch, and I'd lay down on the floor, and I'd be watching. I just next thing you know, I'd sleep for 20 minutes and then watch the rest of the game. And look, it's I don't watch it that much, and I did a lot as a youth player. He's all good. What's up, Gabe? I don't watch it that much right now. Like, I enjoy the storylines of the players, the coaches. I look for different things in the game, but I've got kids, I've got a wife, I've got other friends. Like, there's a lot I'm interested in.
A lot of businesses. Like, there's a lot going on.
There's a lot I'm interested in, and I'm just not interested in watching soccer. And even though I love the game, I watched my little girl, my 3-year-old, swim today with her swim coach. That was my soccer, Nice. It was awesome. So I watch occasionally, but yeah. What do I look forward to in 2024? Personally, I'm really looking forward to being a front row dad. Like, the last couple of years have been hard, man. COVID kicked our butt, and it was just out of our control. We bought a second Pure Bar. We acquired an existing location in Henderson where we're filming right now. We bought the rights to build 3 more with a big capital outlay, and COVID hit a month later. Like, none of our models had any, like, our models were, and pre-COVID, I was.
Nothing like buying an in-person business where 30 days later they tell you nobody's allowed to be in person.
Oh my goodness. I mean, and like, coming into that phase, I was working 20 to 30 hours a week, making what most people would consider as phenomenal living. Our 2 Pure Bars were apparently trading for 4x from like resales that were going in the franchise system. It was groovy, man. I was doing less. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward more to, like, my last week or two, I've been a killer dad, a killer husband, getting therapy, coaching, more time for myself. Our Pure Bars are picking up, like, best quarter we've had in a long time, getting better people on the sales team. I'm doing less. My wife's doing less. Like, you can just feel it. So it feels good to be pouring more into my family while the businesses are flowing. Like, our plane's pointed up, which is glorious. So for me personally, I'm looking forward to more me time, more husband time, more dad time. And I've been hitting that, like, which feels great. Today I was there for my kid when she was sick for a couple hours at home. Went to Pure Bar for a bit. Couldn't tell you that today was Monday, which is nice. Took my kid to swim at 3:30, and now I'm here, while things are flowing. So I want more of that, which is just kind of my ordinary. Professionally, I'm really excited about the current leaders reporting into me and some of the next step we have. Continuing to grow Twilight. We're bringing back our soccer camps this summer. I'm doing my first ever overnight camp, which I've always wanted to do in Flagstaff.
Nice.
So I'm pumped about that. I'm getting involved in nextupleader.com with my good friend and tech partner, Isaiah McPeak. He's a COO at Vendit, which just launched on Bloomberg the other month. And he's got like a communications and sales coaching program, and like, I'm getting paid like lawyer money to be a sales coach, which is super cool. And it's during business hours, which is really neat. Because, like, historically, soccer coaching is when kids are, at home.
Off.
Yeah, they're off. And, like, I'm got a 6 and a 3-year-old. Like, I want to be around more. So there's some potential to grow that business. Yeah, I'm just kind of excited for the flow starting to happen. I think if I'm doing my world right, I'm creating knowledge flow, people flow, and deal flow. And that's like my job. I do that. Everything flows into the portfolio. And we get to work with caring people and do some cool stuff. Favorite movie and why? Is it supposed to just be like a fun movie?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Oh, man.
I just feel like I can learn a lot about somebody, like, on how they answer the question and, frankly, how much they think about the question. Because it's like, some people have that immediate go-to, and they're like, Animal House, love it, best. I've watched it 100 times. And some people are like, man, I really want to get a good answer here.
Let's see. What do you think it says about me that's taken a while? I feel like if it was a book, I'd have a quick answer for you.
What's your favorite book?
I've got a couple. The one I like that has been very impactful on my leadership style the last couple of years is called Quiet by Susan Cain. It's about being an introvert in a world that never shuts up. When I was doing some tech startup stuff with my friend Isaiah, and I was working with all these introverts, and like, I'm naturally extroverted. Like, I'm like quite the charmer, Southern gentleman, like I get energy being around people and being on stage, and here I am working with all these introverts. I'm like, well, no one wants to pick up the phone. So I had to learn how to chat, and I really learned. So this book, Quiet, really taught me a lot about the introverted personality type, and I adopted many of the positive introverted leadership traits to kind of counter some of my extroverted leadership traits that can be negative if they're not in check. That one was really powerful. As far as a movie, I mean, if we're going humor, like old school. Old school's a great one. Wedding Crashers, Talladega Nights. So I'll kind of leave it with that. One of my Chicago Fire buddies.
I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yeah. One of my Chicago Fire buddies, Logan Paws, we would call each other Shake and Bake from Talladega Nights. So that was pretty fun.
I like it.
So probably some of those. I don't watch a ton.
Perfect. That's good enough, man.
This has been awesome. The setup in here is amazing.
I want to have you back when you buy the next business, because I know, we can't talk about it on air, but I know you have some offer letters out and whatnot. But yeah, I want to I don't know, man. I just want to keep hearing about this journey of acquiring more while pouring into people more, while frankly doing less so you can honor the family. That's good stuff, man. Those are the kind of conversations I want to have. So thanks for being on, man.
Yeah, thanks, brother. I appreciate it. And it feels centered. It feels like I'm doing it for the right reasons, not like I have a chip on my shoulder, and I appreciate it. And I've enjoyed our friendship and getting to know you in front of our dads. And I was so pumped when you moved to Vegas. I was like, because you're one of the veterans of the group. I was like, Scott Groves is coming to Vegas. I'm going to be friends with him. What? This is crazy. So anyway, thanks, man.
Appreciate you.